Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Wanted to continue our chassis assembly videos on the 4-seat chassis kit. Like I told you in the last video, we've got some assembly instructions, but wanted to just go over the assembly process with you. And if you haven't seen the first video, check it out. It's the assembly of the lower belly section in the floor. And in this video, we're going to do the rear tail section fender, and then a quick how-to on the sidebars. So, anyways, for the tail section here, we've got the two main lower rails, 2-inch, and then the two main fender rails, they're 1 3/4, and then we have the 6 tubes that make up the rear tail. And so what I start out with is on this main lower tube, you've got your sleeve in here and your plug weld holes. Slide that assembly into your main lower rail and just let it hang out in the back. Do the same thing over here. And what I do is I take a spreader bar and clamp each end using the main belly as a square point. So you can take your tape measure and measure from down low on the belly, way down in the corner there, square up these two rails to each other, clamp them down so they don't move. There are marks on the inside of this lower 2-inch tail tube to show you where these rear main tubes intersect. So if you line these marks up, square up these tubes, you've got a square rear tail section. So once that's done, tack this lower tail in, and then you can go ahead and start the vertical tubes. They're notched on the inside here to accommodate this lower 2-inch tube. And so what I do is I take an angle finder off of the main chassis, and I always reference the main chassis as being 0. That way you have a good known 0 point. And so these outside tubes are going to be totally vertical, 90 degrees from the chassis. So I'll go ahead and set these vertical tubes on their corresponding marks to 90 degrees and tack them in, each of them. And then go ahead and set your top rail on your tail in and give yourself equal reveal on each side. Again, there's marks on the tube that you can use for aligning everything, but it's always a good idea just to double check all the measurements, make sure everything is nice and tight, and the measurements are exactly the same on both sides. And so once you've got your verticals in, you put these kicker tubes in, which will support this entire tail section at 90 degrees. And then once you've got this entire section tacked up in place, you will go ahead and install your driver and passenger fender. And so that just entails the same thing as the lower tail section down here. You've got your sleeves in your outrigger tubes, and you take your tail or your fender, slide it over the sleeve. And what I like to do is angle the fender inward because it's bent. And so the tail tube will stick up high in here. As you slide it down, give yourself an 1/8 inch between the tubes, and then rotate the tube until you contact the tail section. And the way I've notched this in the computer is the tail section will interlock with these two tubes here, and there's a notch in this main vertical piece here that locks this tail into. So once you get it right, it goes right into place, and you can tack that in. And going back after you've got the lower main rails, the fenders, and the tail tacked in, what I like to do is go ahead and grab a 0 point off of your belly pan again and set a long piece of straight edge, whatever it may be, on the top here and on the bottom here, and make sure that these two planes are identical to your belly section. So if they're not, obviously there's going to be a little bit of wiggle room in your sleeves down here where the tube slides on. So you can take and use a jack like we use here, and you can slowly go up on whatever side is low until you achieve your 0 point going across from tube to tube on the lower and from tube to tube on the top. So very straightforward, very easy. The only thing you really got to keep in mind is maintaining these two tubes are parallel with each other and square to the lower subframe. And the best way I found to do that is to use a spreader bar here, and take note that the center line of these two tubes from center to center is going to be 28 inches. So you can either do center or you can measure from inside a tube to inside a tube, which is 26 inches. So maintaining these two rails are parallel going back, square up this lower tail section, and then work off of that. So that would be the rear fender lower tail sub-assembly. If you got any questions, feel free to ask. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions about what you may have. But again, the coping and the notching on the tubes is done in an order to help aid in assembly. So along with the marks on the tube for intersecting pieces of tube and their corresponding locations. So just take it slow, double check, again, that the tubes are parallel, that you've squared up this lower sub-assembly, and that these outside tubes are perfectly 90 degrees to the floor or the belly, whatever you want to use as your starting point with a digital level. So go ahead and get that started, get it all tacked together, and then we can move forward with the front. So we're going to stop here with this one. We're going to move on to the next section of assembly for the 4-seat chassis. Go ahead and leave comments, subscribe, give us your thoughts, and we will catch you on the next one.